Welcome back to some more Kerbal Space Program. So in the previous episode, we did some very basic sort of around the Space Center science, collecting what we can. The next sort of major mission is going to be either the MUN, Minmus, or a hop outside this, the SOI, which is Sphere of Influence. The way KSP handles sort of relative orientations and whatnot, each planetary body has a sphere of influence. If you're inside that sphere, the frame of reference is of that object. If you're outside of it, then it is the parent of that object. So the Kerbal, which is the Sun, has an infinite SOI. So if you're not in another SOI, you're always in that one. So we start out in the Kerbin SOI. If we go to the MUN, we transfer to the MUN's SOI. And there are no bodies orbiting moons. So while that would be very exciting, they're just currently not implemented. So next is going to be a thermometer. Go ahead and take advantage of our freebie tech from the next research tier. And actually, before we go any further in the vehicle assembly building, let's go over to the spaceplane hangar and grab a couple of alternate vehicle designs. So command pod, and let's see, science and science, and some more science. Let's see, need one of those. So assembling something in the spaceplane hangar is a little bit more, I don't want to say complicated, but it is slightly more challenging, as you are limited to two-way symmetry instead of 8-way symmetry. However, it's actually not going to launch. That shouldn't be too big of an issue. Actually, let's just use a smaller tank. Such. So we have that. Reaction wheel, which we don't quite need. And a couple of very overpriced thermometers. Then take the entire vehicle and rotate as such. And there we have a crash. So, the first crash of the game. I will be back in a moment after I get everything reloaded. And we're back. So, minor crash later. And Mr. Groove from the runway. Material bay from the runway. 15 science. Log temperature from the runway. Go ahead and recover that. So I need to actually add symmetry. then we're going to attempt to launch this into the water. So I'm not entirely sure what caused that crash. I know it's one of the mods likes to cause, well, actually all of the mods like to cause a little crash issue now and then. And it would appear that this is being slightly problematic. And then a trick of sorts to help ensure that the vehicle lands in the proper orientation. A couple extra parachutes on one side. And of course, let's stick on MechJeb. Okay, not entirely sure where it's getting some of these numbers, but thrust to weight slightly over 1, so not ideal, but enough that it can be worked from. So let's go ahead and launch this, hopefully without crashing again, and see if we can get this thing to actually work. Landing gear, parachute, that's never going to happen. Not on this one anyway. Actually, what I'm going to do real quick is attach a pair of landing gear right there. They start retracted. So if we can get into the water, we can also test the landing gear. Also, one of the very useful MechJeb tools is there's a current biome feature that you can look at. It helps save from needing to do a bunch of science spam. So we don't have a lot of delta V, but we're only going about 2 kilometers in the easterly direction. So one of the disadvantages of very low thrust to weight ratio is the takeoff tends to be a little bit fidgety. So do we have any material science? Flying at... Sure, why not? And pitch over to 45. So unfortunately, a lot of this is a little difficult to commentate on, as there is quite a bit of just knowing the numbers, being able to quickly do a mental sort of rough guess. If your apoapsis is this altitude with a current altitude of this, and you're doing this, then this should happen. And shores. So unfortunately we're a little low. However, we are now not. So parachutes. Make sure that we're not time accelerating. That would be embarrassing. And this time we have successfully deployed the parachutes, however, with everything at an angle. It means that we are going to hopefully land very gently and not have to do a 90-degree turn 90 degrees when we splash. In fact, if we looks like about 45-degree angle, which is good. So, can we mystery goo? Nope. And we have a crew report. Anything useful here? Not really. The thermometers are reusable. However, in order to reuse them, you have to send a Kerbal out on EVA to pick up the science, which is a little precarious when you're either trying to land or about to re-enter or something. So, as a rule of thumb, I like to carry all my instrumentation in pairs, the main and the spare. If something stages improperly or lands wrong or something happens and one of them ends up breaking, ideally you won't lose anything besides the backup, or basically the backup instrument. And then you just have to go digging through your craft to find the other one. It's one of those cases where it's kind of embarrassing to get all the way to Jewel, only to realize that, oops, we accidentally staged off our entire sensor package, and we don't have a spare. So, let's see, altitude of sea level is getting pretty low. Let's not time accelerate into the water. So, a little rough on the landing, but not devastatingly so. Science, more science, log temperature from the water, and run test. So that is a little bit more science. And we have successfully landed just short of the Space Center. Over here, let's go ahead and make sure that we've already got this stuff, which I think we do. Surface sample. EVA report. That is... well, this is slightly glitchy. Well, I think KSP is technically still in, I think, alpha or beta. I'm not sure which, but it's still in relatively early development. And all things considered, it's stable until you start modding it. So anyway, that's another 71.5 science. And almost all the funds back, and a little bit more reputation. So let's go over here. Radio mount parachute. That should be interesting, but should also be doable. Liquid Mark 55 radio mount engine landed at doable. One stability enhancer. At least this is one of the ones that's actually doable. There are some that are either at altitude or not landed or something like splashdown. Basic jet engine. This is basic jet engine is no, I can just get something up to altitude and then test it. And turbofan in flight. That one is actually a whole lot more testable, so more science to be done. So we can research that, and that, filling out that tree. Next is going to be basic solar panels, which we don't actually have enough science for. We're short by 2.3. And just making sure that I know where all of the parts and whatnot that I'm actually after are. Maneuver. Oh, wow. Flat radially mounted RCS tanks. And micro landing struts. Various science bays. Inline ladders. Protective railing. It's nice to see that there is actually some safety compliance these days. So, next is altitude, radial decoupler, liquid fuel engine flying, T-45 at altitude. Should be doable. Reach space, achieve orbit. Okay, so Mark 55 radial mount engine landed. So I'm going to do a quick build and let's see. I think this is going to be more or less a like a high altitude hop, so I don't need a ton of science components, but I do need some. And let's grab temperature and temperature. Mystery goo, we don't need that yet. Although, heavy-duty landing gear at altitude. While I'm here, I might as well actually test this sort of deal. Design speed. So we have cargo airplane options at this point. One thing that I have tried to do is, and I actually had a successful design for it, as well as several successful deployments. Basically a jettisonable science pod, mystery goo, science junior, entire suite of instrumentation, all nicely packed in an aircraft with several parachutes, landing gear, small reaction control wheel, and everything needed to do a proper science thing. The problem that I was running into is after working out the assorted bugs with dropping something out of a flying aircraft from a cargo bay, I would deploy the parachutes, get everything set up. In theory, the pod should have landed. However, in practice, the aircraft couldn't turn fast enough, nor could it maintain a tight enough turn to keep the cargo or the science pod from despawning. So I do have a couple of ideas for redoing the science pod experiment. However, that is going to be quite a ways off still. So that should have, doesn't quite have the thruster weight that I need. So let's pull that off, that off. Now that does have the thruster weight that I need. 3, not much over, but anything above 1 works. And finally some of the larger tanks. One thing that I was reading on the, I believe it was the B9 sort of release notes page, a lot of the, actually most of the stock parts have very little consistency between them as far as realistic amounts of volume, volume to weight, volume to amount of propellant with appropriate spacing for keeping everything nice and separated. The fuel tanks in each line, so this is the FLT line, I guess, so the 100, 200, 400, and 800 all have appropriate consistency, but between, say, this line and the 2.5 meter line, one ends up being, I don't want to say significantly more efficient, but one does tend to end up being slightly more efficient in terms of space. I'm not sure if the B9 mod comes with replacement values for the parts, but hopefully it does. Anyway, the next thing is some radial decouplers and paired symmetry, and some of those, and some of that. So that should be able to get me up to altitude. And let's see, next is some of these. Also, I do believe one of the mods adds, I think it's one of the mods, although at this point it could be a stock feature. There is engine spool-up time for the rockets, sort of simulating the pump, the very small amount of time the pumps need to get up to speed and whatnot. Let's see, do we have separatrons that we can, on stability enhancers, radial decouplers, liquid fuel engine, T45 at altitude again. Alright, so if I can get these to work, and if not, no big deal. So hopefully they won't end up slicing a hole through the middle of my rocket. Let's do a quick just default save there. and go ahead and get this thing on the launch pad, hopefully without a crash. So looks like I've got just enough time to do this launch, and then I will need to cut the video. So there's that, RCS on, surface, and realistically we're going straight up, so this doesn't matter too much. Alright, I am going to need to see about getting the contract stuff worked out. And it looks like I also forgot the landing gear again. Although I think I should be able to test those on a high-altitude aircraft, if I can ever get one made. Or rather, when I get one made. So let's deploy that chute and cut that. Next is radial mount parachutes. Radial decouplers much higher up. '21. And that I think is 260. Yes, it is. So throttle back. There's altitude. There's test. There's away. Liquid fuel engine at altitude significantly higher up. And not nearly fast enough. Okay, Separatrons actually didn't work. Turbofan engine reach space. Might be able to actually get the space. If not this time, then definitely next time. And I should probably be running a bunch of science. Crew report, save, material bay, mystery goo, save. No, I think we're going to be able to get out of the atmosphere. Yes, we are. So the sort of trick to this is with deadly reentry, not going very fast. Go too fast and you end up, well, actually go too fast and you end up burning up on the way out. Get anything wrong and you end up burning up on the way back in. Can we do upper atmosphere, and do we have, what's this? View data from upper atmosphere. Okay, let's keep that. So what I'm going to hopefully do is do a quick heading change to 270 with a pitch of 85. So we have successfully reached space, and we have another, not very long to do this, but enough time. Grab, take data, collect data, yes. And unfortunately we're now falling. Collect data, remove, yes. Grab, board, dump. Mystery goo, crew report, cancel, keep. EVA, take data, EVA report, upper atmosphere, board, EVA again, grab, and click data, remove data, and board. So we do have, let's see, 140, let's call it 140 meters a second delta V. So I'm going to be using that to decelerate as much as possible before the atmosphere gets too thick and we end up, well, I'm not actually concerned about the rest of the rocket at this point, but I would like to try to maintain as much of it as possible. So right around the 32 kilometer mark, I need to fire at full throttle for as much as I've got. So I know that the capsule does have a heat shield built in, so as long as that will protect the these upper parachutes, then everything will be good. So there's that. Oh, shoot. I completely forgot. Landing stage. And turn this at 90, heading 80. So realistically, this is not going, well, actually, yes it will. Pitch 60. So, due to minor issues with the notes between the launch crew and Jeb, it turns out that we actually do have an entire spare stage for landing and descent and whatnot. So I'm going to use what little fuel we have left to make a short ballistic hop over towards the Space Center, at which point we can safely deploy the parachutes at a measly altitude of probably right about now. Okay, so turn that off. And let's see, how much power do we have? Plenty. Okay, and again we're over the shores. No idea where that's coming from. So, under 4 meters a second is a little harder than I would like, but unfortunately the craft is a little bit off balance at this point. So as soon as we get down close, this will do. Let's see about 3.5. Alright. Slightly rougher landing and upside down, but Jeb's alright, and that's sort of all that matters. Alright, we don't need that. Surface sample, EVA report. There's that. And I'm going to take this opportunity to plant a flag. And the sort of previous attempt at this series that I did, I was looking for some way of getting a sort of landing beacon of sorts that I could place in the middle of the Space Center so that I could orientate. And here we go with the lag, and the hopefully not crashing. Okay, grab and board. And let's recover. So, of course, I completely slipped my mind that I could just walk a flag out and plop that in the middle, somewhere appropriate. Okay, so almost 150 science, 148.4 from that. Parts recovery, 97.8 recovery value, only 5 kilometers off, not bad. Jeb's alright, and a bunch of reputation. So let's go ahead and clear up the contracts, escape the atmosphere. Done that successfully. Radio decoupler in flight, tested successfully, and altitude, of course, 11 kilometers. There may be a party. There probably will be pizza. So, that will wrap up this episode of KSP. Until next time, fly safe.